Please note, this episode contains discussions of race, sex, drugs, and sexual abuse. If you or someone you know is experiencing sexual abuse, the National Sexual Assault Hotline provides confidential 24/7 support at 800-656-4673. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
No matter who we're dating, we have to recognize that we're having different experiences. We're having the same different experiences in different bodies.
Hi, welcome to Town Hall, a Black queer podcast, the podcast where we journey through a theme by sharing stories, music, poetry, and art of varying depth and hilarity. And today's episode is going to be on, it's a controversial topic, actually, interracial relationships and their impact on the Black queer community. First of all, Pep, how are you?
Hi, I'm great.
I've seen you out on the picket lines to stand with the unions for the Writers Guild and SAG-AFTRA.
Yeah, it's ongoing, fighting. It seems like the conversation about the rights of workers is starting to, permeate into the idea of Hollywood, which a lot of people think of Hollywood as exclusively rich and white, which is definitely, there's definitely some truth to that. But, there's also a faction of people associated with Hollywood. And when we talk about Hollywood, it's not just the city of Los Angeles. We're talking about the business of film and television. Yeah. And there's many people who are associated with that industry who you would just are like blue collar, like the bluest of blue collar workers working for check to check and for, barely making ends meet. And I'm one of the things that I think I've witnessed in general, and I do know that like large industries have a vested interest in putting out propaganda, doing interviews, releasing content that sort of sways public opinion away from wanting to support the unions. I do know that it's my impression that in general, whenever we see like the hotel, workers union striking, like the housekeepers and things like that, or when we receive like the janitors union strike, custodial union strike, the blue collar workers union strikes, and other industries, people are quick to support them. But for some reason, when it's associated with Hollywood, people think it's just like, Tom Cruise is crying because he doesn't have another jet. And that's just not what this is about. And I'm hopeful that people will see, as the paperwork is released and a lot of the conversations and what each side is asking for and the talking points, people will be able to see that the things that are being asked for is stuff that has not changed in decades. It is not keeping up with the times in terms of inflation. Anybody that has complained about the price of gas in the past year or two should understand that people who are in one of the towns that drive the most to and from work, the actors, should be compensated, and their pay should reflect that as well. And so, it's fair pay and a contract that hasn't been updated in many, many years, and in an industry that's changing. And then also the technology is changing. And so if you are listening, this is not what today's episode is about, but if you're listening to this, please, please, please take some time and like really review. SAG-AFTRA has released, what it is that they're asking for and what it is they're trying to advocate for pretty clearly, just like the paperwork. And so you can read up on about it yourself. I know that most people don't read. And if you don't read, then please, educate yourself somehow and try your best to support. If you agree with the fact that workers, the statement that workers should be paid fairly and in an updated fashion that reflects the times that we're in, then please support. You can also go out and picket and show your support. Bring your body to the picket lines. Obviously support on social media, and just know that a lot of the people who've worked on, all the people who've worked on mainstream film and television projects, who are in the union, and even if they're not in the union, are not really able, as per the solidarity and in the agreement to stand in solidarity with the unions while they negotiate, are not able to promote the work that we've already done. And so the film projects, the TV projects, the things that are brand new, the things that have already come out, and things that are forthcoming, all of that stops, and we can't even talk about those things. And so that we're not calling for the union is not calling for people to strike, or I'm sorry, they're calling for people to strike. They're not calling for people to like cancel their memberships and subscriptions. You know, that's on your own accord and decision. That's not what people are asking them to do, because that also affects how much money the workers receive. But we are asking people to voice, to be very, very loud and proud in voicing their support for the unions and the individuals who work in the unions, so that we can get this, you know, taken care of.
So if you want to support, you can go to sagafter.com. They have a lot of resources and information on their website, and you'll be getting it straight from the union itself, so you don't have to worry about any misinformation getting down the line. And back to our subject at hand, you know, me and Pep, so there was this thread on Twitter in mid-June that came out. It was about drag race girls and their white boyfriends or partners or husbands. Or lovers or whatever. And Pep and I were both in this thread with that did have some misinformation and some problematic language in it. And it seemed like I can never speak to anyone's intentions unless you know, people can only say their own intentions. But it seemed like one of the intentions of the thread was to have a conversation about interracial relationships and its impact on the Black queer community. There was also, but it was also on Twitter. So,
yeah,
when it's on Twitter,
I think it's fair enough to say that it had more than just some problematic language and inaccuracies. I mean, they categorized, they specifically were targeting the people from Drag Race, the performers from Drag Race, and their choice of partners. But in categorizing all of the performers from Drag Race, called all of us men, gay men who dress in drag first. And secondly, said that we are all dating white men, and then proceeded to post pictures of any of us standing next to a white man. And I took issue with that because I'm not a man. And unless I'm talking to some kind of Republican suddenly, I don't understand what's happening in this conversation. But like to try to have a conversation that's supposed to be pro-queer and pro-Black, to do a hit piece on, you know, only one portion of the queer community and really misgender trans women at the same time, while lying. You are lying about who my partner is. I am single, bitch. You can drag me for my choice in a boyfriend when I choose a boyfriend. But if I don't have one, don't be saying, oh, we'll put her with this person and that's who we're going to punish her for being with. I mean, I punish him because they didn't even call me she. And I just think I think that just, it shows that you're not entering the conversation in good faith. And I don't see people like that. So I engaged with this idea and this Twitter conversation and this topic very, very, very briefly, because I said, how dare you misgender me, and how dare, he's not even my boyfriend, so goodbye. And I was out. However, some of us were really involved in this conversation. And Bob, I remember you were in New York, I was in LA, and I couldn't believe myself. I saw at 2:00 that you were online having this conversation, 2 a.m. And then I went back at 4 a.m. and you were still online having this conversation. And it was at 6 a.m.
Which is not that wild for me. If anyone follows me on Twitter, you know that I have this habit of spending, when I tell you, hours. So when I was rehearsing for Madonna, we would start rehearsal at, like, sometimes I go in at like 5 p.m. So I was but we got out late as well. So I would be up at the wee hours of the morning on TikTok debating about trans rights and about whether or not Christianity is dangerous to Black people. So it was pretty par for the course for me to
it fit into your schedule. You were working nights. Okay, that's fair.
Yeah. But I was certainly, and I also, full disclosure, I had gotten called out for some problematic jokes that I had made on my podcast, and the jokes were problematic. They still are problematic. And also, I mean, I mean, if you follow me, I'm probably going to tell some more problematic jokes at some point in my career. Full disclosure as well. Um, you know, but what I want to do now is hold a conversation about the impact of interracial dating in the Black queer space.
We obviously both have opinions, maybe some differing and maybe some similar on this, but you know, we're both invested in this conversation.
I mean, I don't agree with everything that all of our guests are saying, and some things I probably will agree with
Neither
them. You
do
know,
I.
my opinion about dating interracially in general. I'm currently reading a book called Afro Pessimism. A really interesting book, by the way, really interesting book. And at one point, it talks about negrophilia, and which is essentially a concept of fetishizing Black people for their skin and their social position in the world. It asks the question about if you can engage, if you can be attracted to a Black person without it being negrophilia, basically.
I wonder about
You know what
that.
I
I
mean?
certainly think that if you're an American or wherever you're from, I would imagine that like deep in the psychosis of whoever you are, the thoughts, the cultural relevance, the notions that you know and have learned, and that the notions that exist about Black folks that you've learned in your country, in your place where you're from, the things you've seen and heard culturally, that does play a part in your decision to, and not only your choice of partner, but then also how you behave with them, especially sexually. And so it should on both ends. I mean, for instance, like it may be your first time if you're a white person dating a Black woman, it may be your first time dating her, but you'd be better off to know like that, for instance, something like about her hair. Like, you know, you better know how to come correct when talking about touching or dealing with her and her hair, for instance. Not to stereotype, but I mean, like that is an issue that people of other cultures and races and ethnicities sometimes don't know. And our hair is a topic.
And of course, not just that, but also like what it's like to navigate space with people of different races, and you
Exactly.
know, understanding things that you do, I might not feel comfortable doing because
Well,
of my position in the world as as a Black person.
when two adults of different backgrounds, cultures, races, religions, whatever, get together, in it very generally, there is at some point, if I'm not just talking about like a sexual hookup, I'm talking about like a relationship where they're together and they do things together and they start to integrate their lives. There's reverence for the cultures that that person observes, like socially, traditionally, religiously, you know, familially. You know, when you go over the family's house, you're going to behave in the way that the family would like you to behave, and you know, practice the customs and all those things, even if you're not a part of that group. You know, you'll at least have reverence for them and understand where they come from and learn about them in, you know, whether through osmosis or experience, or you study them in a book before you start dating that person, which might be kind of strange. You know, you start to have a connection where you pick up some of the traits, patterns, and cultures of the person that you're dating, even if they're not inherent to you. And I do think that with Black folks, there's like, if one of the people in the relationship is Black and one of the people's not, that could also be problematic. Like you picking up some of those cultural traits, because it could be seen as cultural
Mhm.
appropriation. And so there is this strange thing of like wanting to respect your partner and observe their traits and cultures and walk alongside with them, and then bring them into your other space and understand that, like, you know, some your Black partner may have qualms about going to Dollywood or Graceland, which is Elvis Presley's place. You know, like being at where they are and what they may historically represent, and the fact that there's other people wearing Confederate flags, flying them high, walking into Dollywood. You know, that might be a thing for certain people. And so, yeah, I'm agreeing with you, Bob. You know, that on both sides, all around, both in the positive and negative, you know, that your choice of partner is influenced by what you may know about the group they belong to culturally.
Have you ever dated interracially?
I have, yeah.
And And do you feel like it's had a profound impact, or were there challenges for you that were brought up in the relationship
I would
because of your
say that
race?
like it'd be really simplistic for me to say that everything in my life was like 100% one way, and then within the minute I dated interracially, like suddenly a whole world opened up and things have changed. I know that's not what you were insinuating, but yes, I've been deeply impacted by my dating experience, which includes people of different races. But you know, I think my personal dating experience is more. My life has been more heavily impacted by my in terms of dating because of being a trans woman, a heterosexual trans woman, someone who chooses to date
Hmm.
heterosexual cisgender men. God, I wish I could change that. Much to my chagrin. But there's some things that come along with that, and some of those things culturally and racially and all other sorts of illies, affect you as it can affect a trans woman in dating. And we're certainly not to the point where dating someone who's trans is like seen and treated as normal, especially for trans women and cisgender heterosexual men who date us. We are still fall victim to violence, domestic violence, sexual violence, and sometimes murder at a lopsided rate currently. And so, does dating pose problems? Yes, I could get fucking killed. And so yeah, and that's one of the things that I think that it's a shame that person on Twitter didn't fail to recognize, is that the choice in who I would date and the choice in partner is partially, at least at this point, partially influenced by my safety, my physical safety, or the threat to my physical safety. Not saying that one group is just going to kill me, but when if being a trans woman and how you're seen and talked about and viewed is influenced at all by the things that are said and done in public and by other groups and other people and things like that, then that has to send a message to you. And so I generally I don't ask people out. I generally just chill and do my thing. And whoever approaches me and displays that they have the things that I think would make me feel safe and loved and appreciated, then I consider that person. And it just so happens that some of those people have been white.
I can't remember who, but someone commented on the thread and said essentially that they, in so many words, that they feel unsafe dating Black men as a Black gay man.
Yeah,
Which
I've
is,
heard that
I would
before.
like to be very clear, that is not my position. Every I mean, I've never had a negative experience with dating a Black person. Every Black person I ever dated, I mean, I'm still friends with them to this day. I don't have a ton of dating history, because I mostly just be in these streets hoeing, if we're being if I'm being completely
Oh,
honest.
we
But
know.
in terms but in terms of dating, any Black guys that I've ever dated, or women, I've also dated Black women as well. I never had any negative. I just never had any negative situations with any of them, and I've never had like a nasty breakup with any
I've
of the Black
had
people that I've dated
negative
in my past.
situations, but the negative situations that I've had were more attributed again to them being male, I think, and heterosexual than the race. Like the negative stuff that I've experienced with Black guys, I've also experienced with white guys, to varying
Yeah,
degrees. But there is, but
it
that
sounds
I
like the
started
answer
dating
is
as an
to
adult,
eradicate.
huh?
It sounds like the answer is to eradicate straight men. We gotta get.
I mean, like cisgender
We gotta.
heterosexual white men
We gotta.
are
We gotta.
behind a
We
lot of
gotta
the
undo.
problems that we have in this kind of world.
We gotta undo. We gotta undo cis straight men. We have to undo
No, we
them
have to undo. We have to
as a
undo the
concept.
the behaviors that have been learned.
Yeah.
That's what it
Oh,
is. But
that's probably a better option than what I was saying.
when we're talking about the dating habits and practices of adults who are making their own decisions and who are Black and queer today, who are Black and queer people who are adults today dating, then it would make sense to consider or factor in their experience, whether they were dating or not, through childhood and everything like that. And I grew up in predominantly Black neighborhoods and things like that for most of my life. And, it is true. Like I did have experiences that taught me that how I would be perceived in circles where there was mostly Black folks would be different than how I'd be perceived in circles where I was the only Black person and everybody else was white. And a lot of that had to do with how I talked, physically moved in the room, how I behaved, mostly the sound of my voice and how I talked and walked. And some of that is connected to, using standard American English, and that being perceived like, oh, for some reason, it seemed like being associated with being white and being gay were like intertwined. Like whiteness and gayness were just like the same thing. And I don't think that, the perception of a Black person using standard American English with a bunch of white folks isn't like, oh, you must be gay. I don't think. I think it's like, oh, you're an educated Black person. That's like, I think that's what their assumption is, or how they behave. The white folks who are around Black folks who use standard American English don't necessarily use slang, what we would call slang. And so,
or AAVE.
Yeah. And so I think that is a factor. That is certainly a factor in, like, how we were perceived, how we were treated, one's personal experience in different groups with different racial identities certainly plays a part in who they choose to date as an adult as well.
Yeah. Maybe one day we'll do an episode on Black sense and AAVE and its impact in the Black queer community. But today I want to go ahead and hop into some of these stories. I got my coffee.
You got your
we're
coffee.
Not sipping tea, we're sipping coffee.
I think it's important that we let everybody know that this topic is much bigger than this episode. It was
Yes.
There were some experiences that Bob and I had a few weeks ago that, for me, I'll speak for myself, where some of them were eye-opening, some of them were unpleasant, because, one's Blackness and one's queerness can, seems to be up for debate at times. And I just think that is not something that other people in the comments necessarily have the right to make a judgment on. But people in the comments will give their own opinion. So you can feel free to talk in the comments, and, we might check you. But, just when you are starting to type right now, just know that the opinions of our guests are the opinions of our guests. We wanted to find people who would have different conversations and be willing to talk about their opinions on air. And then some of those opinions you may or may not agree with. We may or may not agree with. These are the opinions of the individuals, and their experiences, again, play a big part into it. And that's really what the interesting part to me is. It's less about what they are saying and more about what are they saying about their experiences that they've had prior to this moment in dating. But with that being said, I think you might find our next guest quite interesting, to say the least. And woo, we are diving right in. Please, please, please welcome and get ready for Quentin Belt.
Hi, I'm Quentin Belt. I live in New York City. I'm born and raised third generation West LA from Culver City, Palms. I'm a photographer. I don't know. The best way to describe it is I'm like the downtown TMZ.
So you work in nightlife?
Yeah, I've worked in nightlife for a while. I used to be a part of a party in LA called Mustache Mondays. I was the doorman and photographer for that party. In New York, I worked for Westgay, Westway, Santos Party House, shot a lot of ghetto gothics.
we've had some crossover then,
Yeah,
because
definitely.
I used to perform at West Gay back in the day when it was actually at Westway
Yeah.
on the West Side. So today's episode we are talking about interracial dating, right? And it essentially came on my our radar here at Town Hall. That you have you ever been in an interracial relationship
Okay, so this is interesting. This is interesting that you're having me on this. I've never been in a relationship ever,
ever?
ever. But I mean, I am a 38-year-old gay man who's had. I'm like, I mean, I'm probably in triple digits at this point, which you know what I
You
mean.
mean with like
Body
with
count.
partners?
Yeah.
You know, I'm in the triple digits.
Yeah. Oh.
We're very close in age. I'm 37.
Okay.
I'm 1 year younger than you. And you know, I've made it around town.
I'm very proud of you.
We do not slut shame here at Town Hall Pod. On never would we ever be caught in these streets slut shaming anyone.
Yeah. It's also funny
Mhm.
that you bring that this is the topic because like last night I got called out on my Instagram because I do like a hot boys list on my Instagram. And
Yeah.
this person, they were like, "No black boys in your hot list again. This is trash. Like, how dare you?" Da da da. And I'm like, I just told her to go brush her wigs.
Why do you, so when you have you ever had a so can you describe exactly what the hot list is? I mean, it sounds pretty self-descriptive.
It's like
Could
hot
you
boys I know, hot boys I
guys?
follow. It's like if they post a hot selfie, I post it on my page.
So do you know any?
I know all of them.
Do you know any black hot boys?
I do know some black hot boys, but they not posting the pictures I want, like the what like I wanted. And black men are gorgeous. Okay, I've been in several dozen black men in my lifetime. Okay, all in there. But like that is, I can like
You mean
whatever I want.
you mean sexual is I'm assuming what you mean.
Absolutely.
Got it. Got it.
Anybody
Okay.
can get it. My taste. What the first thing that draws my eye just happens to be like an olive skin. I don't know, Israeli. You know, there's no. I don't want to feel bad about that.
Do you feel like people are trying to get you to feel bad about what you're attracted to?
I feel like there's a lot of pressure and both like people like black people wanting to know what like why don't you do this and like why aren't you like you know what I mean, why aren't you just like the person did like why aren't you posting more black boys?
Do you identify as black?
Yeah, I am black. I'm like, and I'm not
Yeah.
like I'm light skinned, but I'm not like mixed. Like my great grandparents are mixed.
Do you think you are more attracted to white men than you are to black men?
I am more attracted to the approach of I don't even want to say white men because like I like it's like Latin, it's Asian. I like all races. I like all races. I will say that most men's approach, black men's approach, doesn't work for me. When I'm okay, because I'm a blouse. I don't know if you know what that term means.
A feminine top.
Yeah.
I've been gay
I'm
for a
not
long
super,
time.
but I'm not super feminine. I carry a bag. I mean, you know what I mean? I carry, like, I got a man bag. Like, I'm not super feminine, but like every time I'm in a situation, and mind you, this is also coming from a place like I haven't really had sober sex in the past 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I'm also coming from a place of like, it's a heightened situation, and most of the people I've been around, they're like, it's just too aggressive for me. And as a black man, sometimes the approach from another black man is like, this is us. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's like, that's mine. Like, I don't, that's not what I go for. Maybe I just don't
Mm-hmm.
go for aggression. I was always, okay, so this might be another thing. I was always bullied in elementary school. I was always bullied in middle school. The more open kids were the fucking white skater kids. You know what I mean? The more open kids were like the fucking Spanish, like, slightly plus size gamers. You know what I mean? Like those were the nicer ones. The ones who were being super mean, but it's super mean to me were like, the boys, the black boys.
What were you bullied for?
Oh, being gay. And I'm like light
Yeah.
skinned. They used to call me Lumiere from Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah. I did you live in did you grow up in a black neighborhood?
I grew up in like mixed. I grew up in I grew up in like Culver City, Palms area. It's like very
Okay.
everybody. But it's funny. They called me Lumiere and I hated it, but then I later got into the ballroom scene and I was like, I wish I chose Lumiere as my name. That would have been fab.
It's never too late to rebrand.
There you go.
So it sounds like you had some experiences in your childhood with Black people
Mm-hmm.
and you found solace and comfort in with white people or with non-Black people. Does that sound accurate? I'm trying to just
Kinda,
hear
but
it
all my
and
best friends were
say it
Black.
back.
All my best friends going through school were Black,
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, I don't know. I never think about it like this. Maybe it's like, it's not a bad thing. That's starting to feel like a therapy session. Something that did happen to me when I was like in the second grade, I was like molested by my babysitter's son. I was like, and I have talked about this to people, like he was like mixed white and Asian. And until I was like in my 20s, maybe I'd be like, I guess that could be considered my first boyfriend. Then I would tell people that, and they're like, you were in the second grade. He was a senior in high school. Fuck are you talking
Mm-hmm.
about?
Sometimes trauma that we have in our youth can really color who we become as adults. And sometimes experiences that we've had when we were really young can essentially create our attractions and can create our fears and the way that we socialize with people.
Mm.
So because it sounds like you were able to find community and friendship with Black people, but you also found it seems like a lot of your tormentors or bullies were also Black people, and maybe the Black people that you're meeting down the line are bearing the aggressions of people from your past.
But yeah, possibly, but there's no aggression. I'm just not fucking you. I'm not seeking you out. And
Well, not
yeah,
saying you're aggressive to them, but the aggression of people in your
yeah,
past,
yeah,
the Black people that you meet today are atoning for the sins of people in your past.
yeah,
Possibly.
sure.
How do you feel in Black spaces today?
Super comfortable. I feel more comfortable in like an all Black space because it's like I feel okay. So I'm gonna be super honest. I was in high school. Was around my cousins. I was around Black kids at school. I hung out with Black kids at school. I hung out all that. Got out of high school, started working. I mean, like my first and longest job was American Apparel. So it was like I was thrust into the white space in LA, the white scene, the Cobra Snake scene. I was thrust into that. So yes, a lot of white people became like my best friends. Um, I personally have always been funny. So like I talk the way I want to talk. Like I I talk the way I want to talk. I used to call nigga everybody nigga. And I used to call like white girls nigga. You know what I mean? I used to call everybody nigga. I didn't want them to say it, but I would call everybody that. It was just the way I spoke.
Mhm.
And it's like something carried on from high school. I moved away from that, but I do think that from the way I was raised, my parents were very like, we don't want you acting this way. Like I grew up on like La Cienega and 18th. Like I lived there when the LA riots happened, and like there was a strip mall like 3 blocks away that was on fire, and we were watching people like walk down the street with shit. And my parents like had me and my sister on the balcony, and they were like, "Don't you ever be like these people? This is crazy. Can't believe they're out here acting like this. This is nuts." And I kind of internalized some of that. Like of course I internalized like ghetto is bad and like, ooh, I don't want to do that shit. Why is everything that's inherent like that's connected to Black people bad? And from hearing that, and it's like, I know, like you've never heard that before, no. But like hearing somebody say that to me changed my host perspective. Like I was back at home in I was back home in February and my dad was going off. My dad was like, my dad he drives like a mega whatever. My dad's a driver. And he drove like Glorilla. And he was like, I heard her friends are disgusting. And I was like, why? He was like, they're just so ghetto. And I was like, what's wrong with that? They can be whatever they want. I'm like, I like kind of like, and now I'm obsessed with that. Like, I want everybody to be exactly who they are. Who gives a fuck? I don't want nobody changing, switching up, code switching for nobody. Like, you can be just as much that as somebody can be just as much, prim and proper or preppy or whatever. I don't do this. They're both very American, you know?
It's so interesting because it sounds like you have obviously some really progressive views in regards to Black people and respectability politics and the ability to be yourself, and you don't have to quote unquote act white or act good or act like you're proper to gain respect. And it sounds like that might stem from childhood. I mean, you did literally have your parents point to
Yeah.
presumably a bunch of Black people
Mhm.
and say, "Don't be like this."
Yeah, they were always like, "Don't be ghetto."
It also seems to, like, on the one hand, it seems like you don't think that being quote unquote hood or ghetto is a bad thing, but
Hell
I hear
no.
you say things. But then I hear you say things where it sounds like it might not be a good thing.
No, I'm saying this is what my parents told me. And
Got it.
that was bled into me a little bit. And my parents also, like, I wasn't allowed to, like, because, like, I a lot of my cousins were in jail, and I have I mean, no, she's passed away. It doesn't matter. I have a cousin, Clarence, who, like, went to jail for, like, a little thing and could have got out, and he's probably still in jail because it's easier in jail. And, like, you know what I mean? And it's like, that's a thing that I was around that my parents were like, we can't stand this shit. You know what I mean? My mom was always like, I don't ever want to hear you talking, like, she calls it slave mentality. You know what I mean? Like, people owe you shit and shit like that. She's like, I don't believe
Mhm.
in that. Which, and nowadays, I'm like, no, we're owed a little bit. We're definitely owed something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't have the vocabulary and how that's supposed to work or whatever, but, like, no,
So
I'm team there was just a video on the Shade Room of Sukiana in London, and she's, like, walking past some white people in front of, like, I don't know, some Buckingham Palace, and she's like, I'm about to eat a nigga's
I
ass.
saw this video.
I
Yeah.
loved it. Make them feel uncomfortable, baby. Who cares, girl? Feel uncomfortable and keep walking. Like,
So you don't believe in the idea, like, there's a time and place for everything. You think
I
that the
think that
time.
there's a time and place for everything, but I'm going to be authentically me in this world that I'm living in, that I'm paying bills in, that I'm having to do all
Got it.
my shit in. Like, I'm going to be me, and I'm not going to worry about you. Then and then if I'm not making you feel uncomfortable, you just go do you.
So do you when I think about how, because it sounds like you're having a reckoning with yourself, specifically in the height of the George Floyd protests, in the way that people are perceived, in the way that Black people are perceived,
Yeah.
and you're juxtaposing that to what your parents said about people who were essentially fighting for justice. Um, and it seems like you're able to reckon with it in terms of people fighting for justice and being who they want to be. But do you think that it's also colored your sex life and your attractions?
No, not really. Not really. I mean, I
So do
do
you,
prefer one thing, but I will take what I mean. I will take what I can get. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like
well,
it's
that's no, it's no grand compliment to be to be like, well, I'll take a black dick if it's lying around.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Um, but it does seem that you have a and I'm just trying to, you can tell me that it sounds like you have a preference
I do have a
toward,
preference. Yeah.
and you don't think that's colored at all by your experiences and the things that you've mentioned here, and hearing people denigrate Black people or say bad things about Black people or call them ghetto and hood and correlating that to bad. You don't think that those.
Subconsciously, I'm super honest. Subconsciously, maybe. I don't know. I don't look at
Mhm.
it that way. I never have. But I mean, that could have something to do with it.
Something I do a lot of times is I notice that I'm hypercritical of people whose bodies, specifically the shape of their bodies, look very close to mine.
Mm.
Like when someone's like really fat, I don't think about that much. Or when someone's like really skinny or really toned, but I'm just like a kind of a dad bod, belly, no musculature type person, and I find that I'm hypercritical of people who post pictures of their bodies online if it looks like my body, and I think that there's a response to me not liking my own body. And
I understand where you're going with that, and I can say that I definitely have talked to, like, therapists and stuff about some internalized homophobia. I will say I am hypercritical about feminine gay Black men. Yes, I am
mhm,
hypercritical. Like, I do have an issue. I mean, it's like a bigger thing is like their portrayal in the media and da da da. And the only black gay men you'll see on TV are sissies and faggots. You know what I mean? Like they have to be non-threatening for them to be on television. Yes, I have a huge problem with that. Do I have a huge problem? Did I have a huge problem with Billy Porter? Absolutely, huge problem. But I moved past that because it's also like that was also me and like my self-absorbed chaos brain, addict brain. Also, there was definitely some of that connection because I would like fixate on it and be like, oh my god, disgusting. Da, da, da. But I've moved past that and like I'm more like in my mind now. I'm like, whatever, do whatever you want. We can be just as multifaceted as everybody else.
There are some feminine gay black men like me that you seem to have a lot of reverence for, but then someone like Billy Porter, you seem to be a little more critical of. But it also might be because I often have a very feminine visage. You know what I mean? I wear femininity to an extreme.
I'm like a New York fashion gay, like, you know what I mean? Like I also, it's like and I don't hate him. I can't stand Lil Nas X because it's not, to me, it's not chic. He's so beautiful and he's on top of the world. Why can't you just dress better? I think it's not cute. And that's just my own, style is subjective. I just think that they don't look good. And that drives me crazy.
What is the crime of being unfashionable worth like, does it merit not liking someone because you don't like the clothes they're wearing?
Oh my god, for me, yeah. If I don't like your outfit, I'm not.
I mean,
I'm definitely
I
not.
don't
I'm not fucking nobody if their shoes ain't cute. I'm not fucking nobody. I'm not. I don't want you. Listen, I'm a work in progress. If I don't like your outfit,
because we're not
I
talking
don't
about
want to hang
fucking.
out with you. I don't want to. I know people who are dear in my recovery life. I love them from afar. I'm not going to break bread with you because I can't. I would be staring at your outfit the whole time and like how bad it looks in my mind. But that's something I'm working on. It's something I will get past. I know it seems immature, but it is very real for me. I'm known in downtown New York. I'm not going to just be seen with anybody in the streets. I feel like it makes me look bad. So which completely contradicts my thing of like, fuck everybody's opinion. And I know that.
Well, we're complicated people, right? People are very complicated. Full disclosure, on Twitter, there was a thread about Black Drag Race queens and their white partners, and our quote unquote obsession with whiteness and our obsession with white people. I've been called out in the world for being around whiteness or being in proximity to whiteness, and I guess that people were seeing it as upholding white supremacy. And I think, and I guess my question is, is there something to, if you're posting men that you love online or men that you find are attractive online, and if the only men that you're posting are men who have Eurocentric beauty standards, white, muscular, tone men, do you think that there's a way that, do you think that you could possibly be upholding white supremacy by posting people who essentially aren't Black in your list of beautiful people?
In the framework of the way you're asking that question, I'm not saying that you're like, I understand what you're saying. I'm going to say again, sure. But am I upholding white supremacy? No, I'm not putting that on my shoulders. Like, do you understand what you know what I mean? Like, sure, it could be taken that way. Absolutely. I'm not going to cop to that in any way, shape, or form, or like wear that. People can take that sometimes. People are going to take and can take anything any way they want.
Do you think that sometimes you don't post Black guys out of just defiance?
No.
Do you think you're ever like, well, I'm not? Are you ever like, well, now I'm just not going to do it?
I literally post my people that I follow who post hot thirst traps, and I've posted Black men before. That's not, you know what I mean? It's just people. They're like a majority. The first one is like da da da. It's like whatever. It's like and it's like, you know what I mean? It's like it's also fantasy because like a lot of those boys are straight. I'm posting. I got a lot of straight friends who posting thirst traps. I mean, this isn't like,
And is that part of the attraction? Is it like straightness? And because I noticed that you said that sometimes you have problems with femininity, sometimes feminine Black men, And do you find that a lot of your attraction is to like masculine presenting men?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And do you think that's a product of your experiences, or do you think it's just like a coincidence that you just happen to be attracted to masculine white men? Or have a preference? Let me phrase it: a preference toward masculine white men.
I don't know. It's something. I mean, I'm a freak. You know what I mean? It's something about like a slightly older, hairy white man laying on the bed and letting me be on top of him is hot to me. You know what I mean? It's like, I mean, I'm a friend of mine. Okay, and also let me tell you this: the last 2 dates I went were with light skinned black men, and they friend zoned me in the middle of the date. Okay, just to show you that's like it does happen. You know, I do go on like those are the last 2 dates I went on, and now I don't even talk to those.
Why do you think? Why do you think you got friend zoned?
I mean, I'm an acquired taste. I'm kind of a lot.
And do you find that more white men acquire that taste than black people do?
I don't know. And I mean, I also like, I mean, I don't know. A lot of these questions are like probably for somebody else. Cause like, again, like I haven't had sober sex in a long time. The interactions that I have, like the sexual encounters I've been in the last while are like in seedy places or off Grinder, off Sniffies and shit like that. And very dark places, you know? But that also like, I went to rehab last year and I my counselor, I talked about my intimacy issues and she was like, that's probably why, you know what I mean? Like a lot of the shit I do, a lot of the sexual encounters I get into are like a secret thing. And she thinks that comes from like being molested as a kid, you know, which I had never even thought about.
I know that you say you're counting days. One of the tenets of being sober is, you know, doing a fearless and searching moral inventory of yourself. And they can, you know, I think I think fearless is the first adjective in there because of how scary sometimes it can be to look within and unpack why we are the way we are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because we really are just kind of, in my opinion, the sum of all of our experiences. You know?
Yeah.
That's why whenever I always try to give a little bit of at least leniency or just people, because I always think to myself, you know, if I had all of your experiences, I would have been just like you. I think that's everyone, you know. That goes for everyone from Beyonce to you know, my 5-year-old cousin. If I had all of your experiences, your DNA, grew up where you grew up, had your parents, I would be just like you. But instead, I ended up being like me. I think if you're only dating white men or white people in general, if you only want snow bunnies, then
Bob.
I think that, well, that's a term that like I hear a lot in the straight world. Snow bunnies. Is that old?
That's straight up 90s Def Comedy Jam.
If you only want the snow bunnies, then I think that maybe it's time to do some introspection and ask yourself why you don't feel comfortable dating or being around Black people.
Well, I mean, I think it's one thing if you happen to look back in your history and see a pattern. That's certainly one thing to examine. But it's also, when you say why, you know, I think it's important to ask why you feel it's so important to advertise and frame in such a simplistic way, you know, your choices in dating. You know, I think that anytime anyone says, I only date ... is, you know, I think you can't really sell that sentence without oversimplifying and generalizing about people on, you know, racial dynamics and people, you know, one way or another. You can't say, I only date one race and here's why, without completely generalizing and sort of prejudicing an entire group of people. And I think that's the problematic part, you know, because there's people, their skin color does determine how they would be treated more likely than how they would behave. Well, the question that I have, you know, and I think this means we'd have to read a lot more bell hooks and maybe even some Brene Brown, like to understand the effects of when we're talking about dating and our choice in dating, our history and our experiences do play a part in that for sure. But then also, like, historically, the impact of something like slavery and Jim Crow and restoration and everything that's happened afterwards, the patriarchy and just like all these different things, white supremacy, have they certainly play a part in how we're treated and how we behave and the choices we make in partners. That being said, I just don't think that there's enough conversation acknowledging some of those things when when the fetishes are in play. And it does make it seem like the fetishes are an individual choice. One of the things that we have to acknowledge, I actually had this conversation the other day, when we're talking about like blackness and whiteness, which is like, in our country, it's a topic of conversation. It's really, we have to talk.
Imagine in America.
It is important to talk about, how Black folks are treated, how white folks are treated, and how the two groups intertwine and intermingle. And one of the things that, again, is a factor, just kind of building off the last thing I said, is the idea of code switching and success when we're talking about, like, going back to what the topic at the beginning of the episode where we were talking about, drag race queens who date white, it was really kind of that Hollywood adjacent narrative where successful Black people or Black people in Hollywood dating white. That's also what had been a conversation, not in this particular moment, but just like in general, you can find lots of people talking about them online and historically. And the sort of notion and the idea that in order to be successful, a successful Black person in Hollywood, on Drag Race, that's that idea. I'm not saying that. Or even in America, if you find a successful Black person and they're a millionaire and they've got all the things, they're probably with a white partner. Like that's the notion and a conversation that's been put out there. That's not new. That's been many, many, many years. And I think it goes back to, like, the idea of, in order to get ahead, how hard are you willing to work to make white people, the people who have historically been in charge of different industries, jobs, and so forth, feel comfortable? How hard are you going? How much is your Blackness going to make white people feel uncomfortable versus how hard are you willing to work to make the white folks around you feel comfortable? And a lot of that comes through the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you act, the things you say, the things you support. And I think that's really what really is at the heart of the issue here.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that is a level of nuance that, quite frankly, Twitter does not offer the girlies. So let's keep the conversation moving and hear a perspective from a person who absolutely does not date white, cannot be convinced. You will never catch her in these dating a white man's streets. She is mixed race,
of mixed race,
and also of not just of mixed race, but also like her parents are multinational. Does that make
multinational, different countries.
Her father is Nigerian, and I believe her mother is a white American woman. So talk about, I'm sure that household there's a lot to unpack when, I whenever any of my friends who have a parent or parents who are not from America, whenever I went to their houses when I was younger, I was always like, I forget that, like, people, when I was younger, it was just wild to me to be like, oh, well, that's right, everyone's not American. I completely forgot that everyone's not American, even though you live in America. And it really kind of blew my mind as a young person, to be honest. So let's welcome Alicia to our podcast.
My name is Alicia Menakaya. I am a writer, director, producer with a focus in comedy. I host and produce a stand-up comedy show called BIPOcalypse. It's a show dedicated to BIPOC stand-up comedians. We are in the business of raising the voice of people of color and doing that for a people of color audience as well. Our next show is August 5th It's at the Heart Department, which is in the Arts District of Los Angeles, and it's at 8 p.m. Doors open at 7. Tickets are available at Eventbrite. I'm originally from Manchester, New Hampshire. I love plantain chips, and I'm half Nigerian, half white. New Hampshire is the third whitest state in America. It's sandwiched between the two whitest states in America. So if you're into mayo sandwiches on white bread, that's literally how I grew up. And it was like, I always say you're as black as your environment growing up. And I thought I was the Kunta Kinte. Coming out, I realized I'm light-skinned as fuck, and I have so much light-skin privilege, and it's gotten me so far. I am bi or pansexual, which is, I don't understand why I'm single. I literally think everyone's hot. Like, but yeah, I came out to my family when I was probably like 26, 27-ish. I always said to myself, I'll just wait until I have a girlfriend. And then that never happened. And then I realized I just want people to know who I am, period. I don't have to wait for some milestone girlfriend to come along. So, yeah, and I was accepted, to an extent. My father told me not to tell anyone. He told me I have to respect my aunties and I have to respect the culture. And in Nigeria, it was actually recently passed that being queer is a punishable offense. And if you know of someone doing queer, then you can also be sent to jail for not reporting it. My mom didn't encourage me to hide it. She just told me that she loved me. I think my father was a little bit more concerned with like reputation and honestly how he was going to have to deal with people asking him about my queerness. So I think I had a Black experience. Yeah. I was very much othered just in terms of numbers. So it was just so apparent on other people's faces and in their comments that that's what they were processing first. So you walk into a room, you can kind of like see their reaction to your appearance and kind of take it from there. Yeah, I think a lot of racism is unspoken. And that's what makes me so curious to explore film to kind of showcase what that behavior looks like, because it's not necessarily something we can put to words. I think that it's so funny when we talk about interracial relationships, I feel like we're always talking about the mixing of whiteness. Um, I don't see as much slack of people like Dave Chappelle being like, you have an Asian wife. Like, I don't really see necessarily, even though he has talked about that. It's usually when white and Black people or white and anything mixes, it just isn't, I don't know. People think it's lowering the white race and mixing that blood, that sacred white blood. Um, it's a delicate topic for me. I just grew up thinking that that was normal, and it took some adjusting to realize that is very much not normal. Especially where I grew up. No one was marrying Africans in New Hampshire. We were the only Black family for a long while. Yeah, for miles. I think one of the biggest humps was applying to college. Like the whole Common App situation, just like the SAT prep, like all of that was like, whew, difficult, very difficult. We have this running joke that we don't know where my mom went to college because every time that you talk to her about it, she like changes the subject or like will kind of like whisper or something. And so my parents aren't exactly like super proud of their academic experience. And I think that's all that they wanted for us was to have like just a really nice upscale Ivy League situation. My sisters went to Georgetown, so that's like Ivy League adjacent, and I ended up going to USC for my master's, so it's also kind of, some people would consider that Ivy League adjacent, but I have a master's in film and TV production from USC. I think it's a whole incredible social experiment, because if you really think about which humans are the most eligible humans, you kind of break it down in terms of like resources and healthcare and access to literally shelter, food, and water. White people are the most eligible humans to match up with. And I do think that there is something happening in like I would say socioeconomically, but academically, there's just more access to different fields of thinking. So when we're talking about queer interracial dating, I see that so often. I think it's because the Black community is so far behind in accepting queer identity that just the sheer ratio of how many queer white people are free and open and ready to date it's just the numbers are higher. And there's nothing wrong with that. We're just catching up. And then what I have been seeing recently, and I know this is a topic that's been going on in the Black community for a really long time, is Black men continually not choosing Black women, who are at the bottom of the social economic, food chain, and Black men being chosen for sexual pleasure, for things of that nature. So that's a topic that I feel like launched the entire show of Insecure, which was trying to kind of take that story back and tell stories about Black people who are choosing each other consciously. I think for a woman, it's difficult to not have the same kind of beauty how do I say, like, beauty aspirations as my mother. I found her, wanting to find common connections in us physically and in our personalities. And there was one point where I did call her out, and I'm like, "You're trying to make me whiter. Like, you prefer it when I look whiter." And I don't know if there's something there of like wanting your baby to look like you, something like that. Um, there's also this femininity that my mother carries that is in me sometimes, but not all the time. So I struggled with that as well. My hair was straight until I was about 15. I used to get routine perms. The three of us did, me and my sisters, and my parents made it very clear that these perms were very expensive. They always told us, like, fucking bitches, your fucking hair is so expensive. So I knew that getting my hair straightened was so important, and that my natural hair was just not it. It's just not it. I'm not ready. I'm not done. I'm not beautiful. Yeah. And I saw like my confidence come out when I would straighten my hair, and, it's picture day, and just, it's so messed up. It took me a really long time to feel like my natural self was actually my best self. I started to embrace it in high school, especially when I got best hair. Though even the whites are starting to notice, like, okay, like, your curls are popping, girl. And I was like, yeah. And then, once you break out of the white world and you enter the blackdom, the Black kingdom, and to be so fully embraced and like worshipped by your own people in ways that no one else can compliment you the same way. Like, it's so magical. I identify as Black. I also identify as biracial, mixed chick for life. Another word I really like is hapa, which is a Hawaiian word for mixed. I am disappointed with the Black community a little bit in terms of like really like wholeheartedly only choosing light-skinned people. It's like so apparent and disgusting. And like some people that approach me and they give me those like, I don't know, I like you because you're light skinned look. I don't even know how to say. I'm just so disappointed sometimes. Even with Black women, they'll say like, they don't say like, I like your hair. They'll say, I want your hair. I want your hair. And I can understand that, like, but there's some kind of like sadness. They don't want themselves. I don't know. It's so hard. Like, we have to work on ourselves before we can expect white people to accept us. We have to accept ourselves first. There's still that over sexualization of mixed or light skinned people. I even see it in children, like in children's things. Like, they're picking like the mixed girl with like the curly hair and like they just eat it up. To my mother's perspective, I was made in love. I do think I was made in lust, to be honest. My parents are happily divorced. They never shared like similar values except maybe family. They have strong family values. But yeah, I think I was a product of that for sure. Jungle fever. I don't know. I'm like, where does kink come into play? You know, we can sit down and break down like why we're attracted to this, or like why we're so drawn to this specific kink, and things can get weird. I think the origins of it can get weird, but they're not always like malicious. And in terms of like what Freud would say about how we're always looking for our fathers or looking for our mothers, it's like we are always kind of starting with a type. And so things get more and more specific as time goes along, but I don't think there's anything wrong with being like, I like this type, I like this specific thing. This really gets me excited, and I'm in love with that excitement or this feeling that this person gives me. I do prefer people of color. I have found myself very drawn to Latin men specifically. It's like my type. I feel guilty. I'm like, oh my god, I have a type. Yeah, like my parents would be like, okay, what's his name? Like Jose, and I'd be like, yeah. They're like, another Latin boy, Alicia. Just the culture that they grow up in is kind of like they can be very machismo, and that actually can rub off in a positive way as a woman. Like they can really, tend to your needs and take care of you in a way that makes you feel uplifted as a woman. With women, I like all women. I still lean people of color, though. I do. Not necessarily attracted to white people as much. I know in the grand scheme of things, like the white queer community isn't like as far as it could go, especially when we're talking about like lesbians, like definitely the gay, like cisgendered white queer community is at the forefront of this like queer game. But yeah, white lesbians are holding it down. They're really like showing up, getting the jobs, and kind of, I think, shepherding for other queer folks, but that doesn't necessarily mean like people of color. A lot of queer folks are still white. They just are. Like there's just not enough people of color who are out and like willing to put their lives or their families or their whole culture on the line to come out. So I just find that there's stronger queer communities in the white circles. Who wouldn't want a slice of that? Who wouldn't want like a slice of queer camaraderie and success, which is living in white space right now? I think some people are still just really caught up in their own struggle, and it's really hard for them to move past that because they're still just comprehending their own struggle. I love Pose. Like, I love that show. I love the casting. I will say, like, I do have a little bit of a tiff with, like, passing trans folks. I'm in the future looking forward to seeing more characters who are not passing. I don't think that we should need $1 million surgeries and tons of meds to feel comfortable enough to say like who we are. I'm also not against anyone who is doing that for themselves. I just think that there's still this weird cisgenderiness happening in the trans community where the passing people are the number one. They're, transferable, and you still get that credit of putting like a queer, different, diverse character on screen when it's kind of cheating. I'm very interested in the characters that, have a beard and a dress on and like walk out the door. I know that person is like struggling more every day to survive, as opposed to the passing folks. So it's just like when you look at the Janet Mock and the Laverne Cox, and you're just like, God, they're like fucking gorgeous. It's just like, when are we gonna let go? Not just in the queer community, but in just like life in general. There's this show out that's like, the summer I was beautiful, or the summer I was pretty, the summer I turned pretty. Yeah, that summer came fucking late for me. Like, I was fucking like, hot out there in the woods. Like, what the fuck? Um, Definitely feeling a little bit like Katie Heron coming to high school and joining the mean girls of LA. That's what I wanted. I got caught up in it for a minute, where the beauty standards in LA are so just fluctuating, and uh, they are made priority in LA, beauty standards. So it was like, I was catapulted into my beauty out in LA, of like, everybody in LA, you work with what your mama gave you, and then you add more spice to it. And it's just taken me a minute to appreciate my own flavor. I will say, the last time I seriously dated a white person, I blacked out with him on purpose. What I mean by that is that I just acted a little extra blackety black, just to see how he would handle it. Cause it was kind of like, I'm not bringing you to the barbecue unless you're like ready. I gotta put you through some hoops. Like, and I look back on that and I'm like, I was kind of an asshole. Like, I should have toned it down. Like, just be a human, get to know the human, and then they should want to get to know you as well. I just had this fear. I always have this fear of like bringing white people into sacred black spaces, because we just don't have as many. I brought my mom to Black Market Flea in LA, and I had so much anxiety about it. I'm not gonna lie. And I was like, Mom, like, I had never been to Black Market Flea, so I didn't really know. I just see the pictures and I know it's like just black heaven or whatever. And so I'm like, Mom, wear this like black owned sweater, wear this bucket hat, like, I need to black you out. And she started to pick up on my anxiety, and she said, You're ashamed of me. I know you are. And I was like, yeah, I was like, I'm like, it ended up being fine. We went to Black Market Flea, and like, yeah, she was like the only white person, but my mom's chill. She literally married a Nigerian. She's been to Nigeria multiple times. She's very comfortable around black people. I just am actually I'm conscious of bringing any kind of white people into a sacred space like that. I don't care how many black badges of honor you have. My mother was chaperoning in middle school. She was chaperoning a field trip. And I'm very used to people asking me if I was adopted. Like, that's happened many times before. But for some reason that day, I was feeling so much anxiety about this white lady coming to my school, my mom. And she walks in, and this bitch had gotten her hair, like, her hair was curled. She wore a faux fur jacket, nice like boots. And I was just like, fuck, like, for sure now everyone is going to think that this rich white woman adopted me. And I don't know, it's just like exhausting. It's exhausting to have to explain yourself, to be in a grocery store, and for people to be like, are you lost? Like, where is your mother? I'm like, she's right here. This is my mom. It's exhausting. It was huge eye opener with George Floyd. That was a big deal. It kind of like let everyone know where we were at, in terms of race relations, and our thoughts on it. It was like a huge check-in for the whole world. And it just so happens that I was flying to Boston the day that George Floyd died. And as soon as I land, I'm looking at my phone, I'm looking through my text and social media, and I just see my friends openly weeping as I scroll. And it's so deeply emotional that it makes me burst into tears immediately. So my mom pulls up at that point to pick me up at the airport, and I get into her car weeping, and she's like, what's wrong? Why are you crying? And I was like, Mom, this guy died, and everybody's my friends are just so sad. Like, my entire community is crumbling right now. And my mom was like, yeah, but why are you crying? And that tone let me know where we were at. So I proceeded to have a tough conversation with her of what's going on? Like, why have you never asked me, like, hey, black child, what's it like being black? Um, I was attacking her at first, and it really didn't help. I needed to come a different way, a sideways. So instead of being tangential, I said to her, I gave her credit. I said, Mom, wow, you are so ahead of your time for marrying an African. You're so ahead of your time. Like, who do you think you are? And she started getting a little confident. And then I opened the door of like, why don't you know anything? What's going on here? And she admitted that she's ignorant as fuck. So my mother is working class white. A lot of people in her family did not go to college. On my Nigerian side, doctors, lawyers, engineers all day. When people see my bouginess, it is because I am Nigerian. It is not because I am white. I am bougie because I am African. Um, who came to this country and said, I'm gonna get this bag or nothing else. And um and I resent that. Like, don't always assume that I'm, well spoken because I'm half white, please. You don't know. But, whiteness has its resources too. So my proximity to whiteness has given me a leg up in so many ways. So it is one thing to be yourself, but there's almost like this strange responsibility that certain individuals have where they should be in front of the camera, or they should be um, showcasing their humanity, because it's literally not seen. And I think that the more that Black people are able to open up and be themselves, we'll be able to see why they match so well with the white community that has had centuries of experiencing what it's like to be themselves. Do you know what I'm saying? The community of white people has experienced so many deep levels of knowledge of self simply because they have the time, the resources, the energy to do that inner work. When it comes to, I don't even know what you'd call it, the philosophy of queerness, they are ahead in this. There's a white person for everyone because they are so like individualistic. Like, they really are like their own individual flavors. That's why we have so many like cool and diverse shows for them, TV shows and movies, and there's just so many layers to them. And so there is a white person for everyone, and I think that ties in with colonization, the fact that white people have been able to colonize the world and just take a piece of everything and almost kind of like become worldly and understand different cultures. They're able to infiltrate different cultures, and that can happen in a romantic setting as well. No matter who we're dating, we have to recognize that we're having different experiences. We're having the same different experiences in different bodies, and some of those I see what you're saying, because some of those experiences are heavier or darker or just worse. Like, and how do you share almost that trauma with your partner when they cannot touch it? I think women have been doing it for so long. Like, I feel like we wrote the book on this. Like, we've been suffering for so long. Like, so I think that the queer community has something maybe in common. There's some common ground there with women.
In the midst of our conversation, and I'm using the word conversation on Twitter very liberally.
Loosely, darling.
Yeah. There seems to be kind of an insinuation that like Black people who have white partners aren't having hard conversations about race in their homes, which I can't imagine. Living in a house with a white person and not having conversations about race and how it affects me and not having conversations with about race and being Black and how it affects me in the world, and not just being Black, but what it's like to be with a white person and perceived in public with a white person?
I think it depends on the power dynamic. Honestly, I'm going to be very real with you, Bob. You know, you are a public figure. You are a very vocal, outspoken person, and I do think that the power dynamic in the relationship would play a factor in how much you were willing to have conversations about race and politics, which are oftentimes intertwined. And so, I can imagine being in a relationship. I haven't been in one like this, but in a relationship where, if you're in a relationship with a white man who pays all the bills, brings home all the money, is the main breadwinner, not wanting to challenge that person, especially if the conversations on race are something that would challenge and draw examination, cause them to examine an interrogation of their behaviors in the relationship. So I think we'd have to, the people in the relationship would have to tread really lightly. I'm not saying that they should, but they may make that decision to do so. And so I can imagine I'm just saying, I'm kind of pushing back a little bit because you said you can't imagine. I can imagine not having those conversations or not wanting to have those conversations if you don't feel safe. Also, if you're in a situation where,
I guess what I meant was for myself. I couldn't imagine myself in that situation, I guess is what I should have said. I mean, I can imagine people doing all kinds of stuff that I couldn't possibly do personally. You know what I mean?
But
I mean,
so you think do you think it's...
I mean, I couldn't imagine eating a sandwich with mustard on it, but I can imagine that other people in the world do.
Okay,
you know what I mean?
Now we're going to have a problem.
You like mustard?
I will lick mustard so good. It is delicious. First of all, I love vinegar. So you also don't like pickles, do you? Or olives?
I love pickles. Are you kidding me? I hate olives.
Okay. It's either one or the other.
Pickle.
People who don't like mustard either don't like, in my experience, it's non-scientific, but it seems like people who don't like mustard either don't like pickles or olives. One of the two. I love pickles
If an olive gets near, send the whole thing back. Send the whole thing back to Greece, where the olive came from.
Back
to the start. Back to the
okay, yeah. I have a huge problem with Candace Owens. Okay, I don't know.
Where did that come from?
You know, because never mind.
Well, it is annoying. I will say this. It is annoying to be online and to be grouped in with the likes of Candace Owens and Christian Walker.
Yeah, that's where I was going.
And then I feel like Nene Leakes. How did I get in it?
That's exactly how I felt. I wasn't asking to be doing that. I'm not trying to, like, you're going to associate me with Drag Race, fine, but like, please don't call me one of the guys. Have everything I've said and done? You're going to take what I've said and done and try to use that against me, but not use what I've said and done when talking about the queer community, my transness. You're going to ignore that, and then you're going to make it seem like I'm out here, you know, a proponent of only dating white folks, but not acknowledge the fact that I'm single. Come on.
Well, they don't want to acknowledge. They don't want to acknowledge a lot of stuff. Like one of the people was like, Bob, you never come to Black spaces and you don't do Black things. And I was like, not only do I come to Black spaces, I create Black spaces. I create Black events. I participate in Black events that I don't throw as well.
I just think that's really disingenuous because it's really difficult.
A level of nuance they're not interested in engaging in, or a level of research even maybe.
It's really sad to see people sort of floating that and selling that when not acknowledging. And what I remember very, very, we don't even have to go back into the spaces that I tried to enter that were 100% Black and also predominantly, at least outwardly, heterosexual, cisgender and heterosexual spaces that I've tried to enter where I was not welcomed into. And like, forget all that. And back in 2020, when we were outside marching for BLM, and I was definitely outside, and there were very few of those marches that were queer-centric and queer uplifting of queerness and inclusive of queerness. Some of those things were just like just a general Black Lives Matter march, and I was right there with it. But it's really difficult for me to hide my queerness when I'm walking outside on the street or walking inside anywhere. And so there were times and moments where I was fearful or didn't necessarily feel a part of the conversation. And I'm not saying that I walked out there and felt like I was going to get beaten up, but when I was hearing the speakers or the people that were marching, speaking from the heart passionately about the inequalities and inequities in our country and the discrimination and the things that we face and the violence and all these things, nary are they talking about including trans women in that talk and conversation when they're talking about violence against women. Nary are they talking about including LGBT people when they're including how Black people are perceived and treated in this country. And I think that this separation of LGBTQ and Black is something that everybody's okay with, but for some reason, if you are a Black queer person, then your Blackness and your queerness can simultaneously be called into question, and we are the ones who have to assert the Blackness and uplift Blackness like to this like almost like superhuman ideal when no one else is accepting our Blackness in any other context. Why is it that we have to be constantly demonstrate and walk our Blackness in front of other people for their acceptance when they're not willing to accept our Blackness in other situations? And that is a problem.
Yeah, and I think that yes, I want to say that out loud. Yes, and I think that maybe to give a small amount of pushback, I think people would say that the issues that you're having in regards to your queerness not being accepted is obviously not exclusively a Black problem.
No, it's not.
There are spaces where you will be where they are white and they will also not be accepting of 100%. Your transness or your queerness.
Predominantly, because many of the spaces in general that exist.
But it is upsetting when you're in a space with Black people and you want to connect on the basis of your Blackness.
That
but
is only in the terms of Black queer situations. That's what I meant to say. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but your Blackness is if you're in a sometimes, not always, but in some heterosexual Black spaces, your Blackness is called into question because of your queerness as well, which the two are inextricably tied together.
They are,
depending on obviously. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's really. I would say a red flag of mine is if I'm talking to anyone and you ever quote Dr. Umar, that's when I realize we're not on the same page, baby. We're not in the same book. We're not in the same series. You're reading J.K. Rowling and I'm reading Bell Hooks. We're not even written by the same author at this point. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. Woo! This is getting hot, y'all.
Let's round out the pod.
It sounds good. Okay, so we have another person here. We're really grateful to our guests today because I do know that this conversation is one that is not a settled conversation, and that people putting themselves out on any podcast and willing to speak publicly could open them up to some criticism. And if ever there was an episode that might do that, this could be one. And so we are really appreciative of our guests, and especially our third and final guest, Brontes Purnell, who is a writer and a musician, a dancer, a director out of Oakland, California. Yay! And author of several award-winning books, including 100 Boyfriends, which won a Lambda Literary Award for gay fiction. Yeah. And was also the frontman for the punk band The Young Lovers. Brontes Purnell is our next guest. Please take a listen to what he has to say.
My name is Brontes Purnell. I am a writer, dancer, and musician and performance artist. I grew up in Alabama, but I moved to the Bay Area 21 years ago when I was 20 years old. And so I've been here making art ever since. So when I was a teenager, I worked at this fried catfish restaurant with this other gay boy. And anytime somebody asked him if he was gay, he would be like, I am 32 flavors and then some. I'm whatever your imagination perceives me to be. And of course, these 60-year-old Southern white women would just be like, what does this faggot talking about? What does this mean? And so I always want to say some shit like that, but no, I'm gay as hell. I'm gay and black. I'm gay and black. I grew up in this township called Triana, Alabama. 500 people, all black. I went to Alabama A&M, which was up the street, which is like a historically black college. I did not have white friends till I was like 12 or 13. Like I grew up like in a township of like all black folks, you know what I'm saying? And then sometime around when I was a teenager, I like got into punk rock. Like there was this other black girl in my high school who was also a punk rocker. So like my first band was like this all black punk band in Alabama in the 90s. But it's also we were very weird and like, Southern black culture, very conservative. And especially at that time, like it seems like it's a different thing these days, but the first boy I hooked up with was this white boy that we were both in a band with. And so that just to give it to y'all like this, I know this is probably we should lead to this, but just to say it flat out, um, in my 20s, I think I was more concerned with having a white boyfriend or thought that that was the way it should be. Put into practice, I've had way more black dick than anything. Like when I was in my 20s, working at the bathhouse, working whatever, like it was always like older black and Latino daddies, like my that period where I was because I was like I was in punk bands, I was hanging out, I was like doing all this countercultural Bay Area shit, which just puts you in line with just a bunch of white people. Also, mainstream gay culture just puts you in line with like a lot of white folks, like you can't really avoid them. But in the back of my head, and so I don't know if this is actually, I don't know if this is real or I just felt this way because it's the way I painted it. In the back of my head, I thought that there was probably supposed to be like some white boyfriend there and an apartment in San Francisco and like this kind of weird shit that when I look back at it now, seeing the actual circumstances of my life, feels a little silly or feels like that was something that was being fed to me. But in actuality, most of my boyfriends, most of my long-term partners have been black men. And cut to today, I don't even fuck white boys really. Like, and that's just because most of my trade comes from sniffies. And when you got an ass and body like mine, it's generally like a down low black dude that's coming to beat it up. Whenever time I look at a white boy and I think, oh, he's cute or whatever, there's this automatic like baggage that comes into my head. This second guessing because that fool is white. Like that cracker is white as fuck. Yes, I like white boys or whatever, but I've also been trained to like white boys my entire life. I don't trust niggas that say shit like, well, I just prefer white men. Preference, quite stated bluntly, is based in racism. There is no way you set your black ass in America, especially in the 80s and 90s where we grew up. Every advertisement, every gay show you've ever watched, everything was pointing to like white men. Like it's a neurological con job in one way. Like I don't trust people that don't have some type of understanding of that or explain that or can't explain that or just blindly accept their preference as their who blindly accept their intuition as just like good and pure and just something that they chose. I tend to I tend to think that the choices we make were made for us before we were even born. I think that white men that date black dudes is a whole spectrum of people. Like so many weird caveats that I would never say make any type of sweeping generalization about that. I'll say it like this though. I'm mostly a bottom, right? And I also think the reason why I'm just not with a whole lot of white men is that because it's like it is very hard to find a white top who slays. And I'm sorry, like, I mean, just sheer number wise. The white boy who goes on Grinder and says, I'm looking for a BBC, I'm a sub bottom, I'm this, that, the other. And I've sat next to these boys on their grinders, couple of them over the years, and the responses they get and the wide net that they cast, being in that body and saying that, right? Whereas opposed to like, I am like a hipster black bottom. I know all the hipster black bottom boys in New York, in LA, whatever. There's too many of us that have slept with the same white top for me to believe that our options are just way fucking lower. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm not saying that white boys like can't top or whatever, or they're not inclined to, but it seems that way. And also with just the media presence of like porn that we've seen and stuff, like Chi Chi LaRue's like what's it called, White Boy Beatdown or Black Dude Beatdown, and you know what I'm saying? Like you can see that porn everywhere. Like, you type in race play, 99% of the porn is centered around a white bottom, you know. If it were the other way, and for good reason, if it were the other way, it would bring up a lot more like bad feelings for people. It's a way touchier subject. And also the idea that the black body must always be the active partner in order for that interaction to feel just or whatever. But then, like, if you're a bottom and you're like me and you're trying to get it slayed real quick, I mean, your general option is probably like another black dude. That's what I've known existing in this body. Oh, race play. And I think do whatever the fuck you want. Like, I feel like, I'm a liberated girl in the bedroom. It's like whatever. I have like complicated feelings about it because it's like even even having sex with another black man, like, the specter of white supremacy is still in that bedroom. Like, race play is always happening like on the black body some way somehow. Um but as someone who's been into a lot of kink, the problem with race play if you're a black bottom is finding that actual unicorn of a white top that can do that. And it's just like, I just don't think that person exists. It's either a white dude who's a total Jeffrey Dahmer that wants to turn you into a sausage afterwards, or does not have the actual chops to be like that Dom white top that can, like, bust M bombs with, like, clarity, and like you not sit there and like giggle and shit. Furthermore, I've had this argument with this light skinned hipster boy in New York that was just like, how could you even like talk about race play in front of people? And I'm just like, nigga, I fucked niggas in Oakland, like DL drug dealers that be fucking bringing guns to my house and motherfucking shit. Bitch, if I can survive that, I can definitely survive an M-bomb during sex. Who the fuck is y'all niggas talking about? The boys that are the most pressed about, like, the race play topic are the boys who they probably want white partners, and in their head they're so goddamn vanilla that, their white partner, like, objectifying their black body is just the worst goddamn thing in the world. First of all, it's sex. It's not gonna objectify itself. If you want that good fucking thunder dick beatdown, somebody better be objectifying you. That's how the fuck it works. The black men who I know who actually have sex with other black men and are confident and cool in it, the subject of race play never even comes up. It's never even like, the most worrisome scourge in this fight of interracial relation. There's something very disingenuous about the way it comes up. There's a reason why when you in most interracial porn, you type in gay interracial porn, and almost 90% of the scenarios, the black man is the top. I was talking to this guy, I think his name was Tim Alvaretti. I forget, but he made porn in the 70s in California. And I remember I did this event with him, and I asked him, I was like, why weren't there more black bottoms? And he was like, in the 70s, at the time, it wasn't that we would not hire black bottoms. It's just that socially, porn became more mainstream. You could see it in theaters. You could not find a black man that would get fucked by a white man on camera. It was almost against the laws of physics. It was against the social code. So there's that kind of first thing that happens in porn where you only see black men topping, but then after it gets a root in it, and even as maybe like social structures become a little less rigid or whatever, it still kind of sticks. With Twitter and with the proliferation of porn being heavily democratized, we're seeing some of these structures kind of fall. I think we're at the very, very, very peak, the very beginning stages of watching what's going to be like a new era of kind of all bodies going at it. I hope. I hope. Because in the system that I used to write for Naked Sword. I did 100 Boyfriends mixtape was one that I did for Naked Sword. And I remember one of the producers telling me that when he got the applications from a lot of these porn stars, a lot of white boys, that they always asked them, what are things that you will not do on camera? And he said something like in the 90th percentile of applications will be like, I won't do blood, scat, child play, black dudes. Doing an interracial scene is like your swan song. When you ever look at them Chi Chi LaRue videos and like you see the white boy banged out, like the white boy getting gang banged by those 10 black dudes, that's his swan song. After he does that scene, he will more than likely get paid less and less for every other scene after that. More than likely just like be maybe like well no pun intended blackballed from from the thing because it's like that's I don't yeah we inherited the system like that. It's still a hot topic, you know. Statistically, it is proven that your average gay black man dates another black man, right? The gay black population of Chicago and Detroit alone like equals the entire black population of the West Coast period. You know that all them fucking black boys are over there getting it in, having the time of their motherfucking lives. Yet we sit here on the coast being like, oh my God, if I like sit with my white boyfriend in a restaurant, like what does that mean? And it's there's something about it that is a little like silly to me. But even like in my own journey, it's like I mostly have sex with black men, but then also I mostly grew up with black men. The boys who have a harder time with that are like, there's like black men I know that are just like, well, I was the only black boy in my school, or we grew up in a white neighborhood, or we went to a white church. And I never know how to speak to that because that just wasn't my experience. But like me, like, yeah, when I see another fucking thick ass looking Nigerian uncle motherfucker walking down the street, I'm just kind of like, damn, that's my body. Damn, I look good. Like, this is like, let's get it going, you know? But also, too, I'm just kind of growing up at a bathhouse. When I was 21, I worked at the bathhouse in Berkeley, and I don't know, just being around those that older group of bathhouse men from the 70s and just learning to always have this kind of like open mind and open eye and being like, yo, you should fuck everybody because everybody has something to teach you. Like having net IQ with me, you know, I'm down to make more choices. So many men that I've known interracially that date specifically interracially, it's not that they just love white men. It's almost that they like whenever you ask them about their relationships with black men, it's like they have to diss black men also. That is the part where I never quite understand, or I feel like there is actually something racialized going on. And I mean, but it's also like, I don't know, like but also even when you're with another black man, there's fetish going on there. In terms of excavating my inner dialogue around a lot of things, I journaled. I really journaled. I put my silliest thoughts, my most ballistic thoughts, all my kind of like my quote unquote taboo thoughts, like right in front of me. And I like read them and I was like, when I read this out loud, does this feel true? How do I make this feel truer to me if it's something that I'm attached to? You know, but it's also like it's hard because you don't run a value you can't run self-evaluation without the risk of self-deception, right? And so the idea of making sure that you're always kind of like honest with yourself about your feelings and why you feel that way, and but then also too like always feeling like my thoughts or my life or my everything was always quote unquote so extreme because I lived in this like wild black artist body when in actuality I think I have a lot of feelings that the rest of the world has around relationality and how am I fitting in and who am I fitting in with and what does this body mean, and you know it's really hard to be honest with oneself, but I think when people try you can get into a truth or an ease, and you can forgive yourself. And I think when you can forgive yourself, you can be more open to the rest of the world. You know what I'm saying? You can see the world with a softer eye and see like, I don't know, it's hard as fuck and we're like all really trying. I think there's great taboo. I mean, there's great catharsis in the taboo. You know what I'm saying? And also, I think at the very gist of race play and kink, let me tell you something. A lot of people are not very versed in kink either. Like, just general, like, what's considered taboo sexual role play, they're not versed in it. The idea is, as a black body, I'm going to receive racialized hate no matter what I do. That's at the ice cream shop, that's at McDonald's, that's walking down the street. The idea of doing it in a kink setting is I can have it in a controlled setting where I control it. You understand? Or it's something that feels like, I don't know, naughty, because doing naughty shit releases crazy dopamine. There's lots of reasons why people do or don't do shit. Um, I yeah, I think we're adults and we can do whatever the fuck we want. Also, too, the people that probably like would be down on the person doing kink in the bedroom of that sort, they probably don't have any kink in their bedroom at all. They are probably the shittiest fucking lays you have ever had because guess what? They're on the internet attacking people. That is the first sign of how you know someone ain't got no good dick for you. Like, so it's kind of I don't know, it's kind of whatever. And also, I don't know, it's such a blase point to me too. Also, if you're a black girl looking for a fucking dom white top, also good luck if you can even find that because I'm here to tell you there is a fucking crazy shortage of them, girl. Crazy shortage. Dating is hard in general. Like finding someone that you are compatible with in a world where most people are widely incompatible is hard. Whoever your boo is, if y'all can get in a room and agree on anything, like good for you. Good that you found that. You know what I'm saying? Like I know like black men who are mostly with other black men, they don't have exponentially less relationship problems. Do you know what I'm saying? I know plenty of white boys with other white boys. They don't have exponentially less problems. Just very baseline. Finding somebody that you can like agree on anything with is kind of a small miracle. So I don't really like. I don't know. I don't hate. I don't look at two people walking down the street and assume anything. But also too, like the funny function of being in any type of interracial situation, right? Like I noticed when I was younger and I used to like trudge through Castro all the time. Like whenever I was walking with a white boy, that's when other white men would give me the eye and flirt with me. And it's like Phil Sloan, who was like this porn star that I used to see at the Eagle in San Francisco. He was so awesome. He was so rad. He was like, well, it's like having a puppy. If you have a puppy, people with other puppies will say hi. If you don't have a puppy, they're not going to say hi to you. But the assumption that or like be walking with a white boy and then all the black dudes on the street saying hi to the white boy I'm walking with. This is whether we were being in a romantic partnership or not, just like hanging out together. The assumption on the part of those white men that, oh, he likes white guys, but not he likes this very specific white man is what kind of always kind of floors me. Or the assumption on those black men's part that, oh, he's into black guys, but not this very specific black guy. Do you know? It's yeah, people's people's thoughts around race or whatever is very like it's very wild and very unexamined. And also like even the fact of like subjects like this are so taboo to talk about. The fact that we can even piece together an actual definition of what race play means and how it goes into the bedroom and how it's like a spectrum of things. And I don't know, like even when I'm sitting there with like, these DL like black dudes and they fucking pumping me out and they just like, yeah, nigga, take that dick, take all that fucking like these niggas is really sitting there living out their craziest like transgender prison sex fantasies on my body. What we are doing together as two black men exists in the realm of race play. Do you know what I'm saying? And the fact that no one, I don't know, no one pieces that out too. The way like being in a black body locks you into a racialized fixed experience. So I just released my first electronic record called No Jack Swing. Um, it's out now. It came out 3 days ago. It's amazing. I recently put a single out on Sub Pop, my rock and roll single. I have a song called Jabuki, and it's about that light skinned troublemaker, Jabuki Young White. We he be up in my DMs, and I be up in his. The next episode needs to be about what it means to love a light skinned man, because that's a whole other topic. Also, um, but my book, 100 Boyfriends, is still going strong. My next book is a poetry book called 10 Bridges I've Burnt. There's galleys out. There's advanced reader copies, but it's not out till Black History Month, because that's when all my records come out, either Black History Month or Juneteenth. I don't know what that's about, but it's been an excellent marketing strategy. And I'm working on my science fiction book.
All right, but this episode
Wow.
is this episode. There was a lot going on in this episode. We had a lot of people, and I feel like we covered a wide range because we didn't want to make an echo chamber.
Yeah, there's a lot to say, and probably too much, for just one episode, quite frankly, because we have to talk about romance. We have to talk about, like the sort of romanticization of masculinity, which is also talking about patriarchal structures and misogyny. Those are factors in queer relationships, and then also race and racism and white supremacy, and then also like gayness versus heteronormative behavior and notions. And so like that's a lot to unpack, and then also
And we've only touched
pro-blackness.
we swept the surface of the iceberg. I want to recommend you all. I mean, this is not a plug; it is kind of a plug. But I have a book club over on my Patreon where we read books together. Right now, we're reading Afro-Pessimism together. I would recommend you all read Afro-Pessimism by Frank B. Wilderson, the third. But also juxtapose it with Dr. Angela Davis's takes on Afro-pessimism and conversations surrounding anti-blackness. And I think that it's a really interesting thing to like compare. There's not a whole lot about Angela Davis talking about it, but Dr. Angela Davis does talk about it a little bit in this one panel, and it's an interesting conversation. It's a very, very interesting read. And I'm still in the middle of the book, so I haven't even made it all the way through yet.
Yeah, I do think when we're talking about interracial relationships, I do wonder, there's so much work to be done when it comes to, being progressive ideals and with regards to both queerness and also race. And there's a lot of work that still has left to be done, and that's societal work. And it really is, I think, interesting to try to see where we draw the line, on blackness, on someone who we would consider to be pro-black in every other situation, but the fact that they are dating someone who's white may or may not just suddenly disqualify them in all the work and all the things that they've said before. Suddenly that's like they're a heretic, and I think that's it's really difficult to try to figure that out. There are certainly people of different backgrounds and racial makeups and ethnicities and cultures and religions and things like that, different experiences that do contribute very well and wholeheartedly to whatever group of people that they belong to, but happen to date outside of that group, and calling it into question simply because they date outside of their race is, I think, unfair. And I think if we went back and it deleted all of the strides and accomplishments that were made throughout history by, let's just say, Black folks who happen to have romantic relationships with white people, or white people who happen to have romantic relationships with Black people. If we deleted all of their accomplishments and things that they did publicly, I think we'd be noticing a lot of things would be missing that we really enjoyed. And so,
yeah,
I'm not just speaking artistically.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and again, if you want to look at some more stuff, Afro-pessimism is a bit of a heavy read. If you want something maybe lighter, I recommend Strange Loop is a very interesting play about the topic. Also Slave Play. Just plays tend to be shorter reads, and Strange Loop also has a soundtrack, so you can really just listen as you go. And there's lots of work. There are video essays on YouTube. There's so much work to be done. Please do not think that this is the beginning and the end of the conversation. To quite frankly, we're somewhere in the middle, and you need to do a lot more research, and find out where you stand and how you feel about it, and honestly challenge yourself. Truly, truly challenge yourself and ask yourself why you hold the views that you have. Because that's helped me anyway.
I do think it's worth repeating one more time that the opinions of all the people that you've heard on this show today are the opinions of those people, not necessarily the opinions of Bob or myself or Town Hall Black Queer Podcast. And we are just really grateful to you, our listener, for always listening with an open heart and open mind. And we're grateful to our guests to come and say their own experiences. And with that, we want to say thank you to our production team, our executive producer, Tracy Marquez, senior producer, Charlene Westbrook, producer, Corey Nixon, and post-producer, Amelia Rittaler. And as always, fabulous music by La Femme Bear.
Bye. Producer, I hardly know her.